everybody, and welcome back. Today we are talking with Nidhal McCormick, and she is out in California. So when I was in California, we tried to do this in person, didn't quite work. So we are doing this again today, and we are talking with Nidhal. So it was just over 5 years ago, Nidhal became a young widow. And I hate to define her by that because she is so much more magical than just that label. But I think going through something so young, you have such a great insight as to perception. And today you're going to be bringing some tips and not tricks, but just ideas for people who are maybe younger and going through a loss of a spouse or a parent or anyone to keep in mind. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And we did, Nidhal and I had talked, it was maybe about 2 years ago, has it been, about kind of going through the funeral and going through the loss of Matt and those initial days and different things. And I had said we were always going to come back and do a tips video, a quick tips video from Nidhal. So I'm going to let you kind of have it. So what are your beginning tips for anybody who's going through a loss?
Yeah, and I think this is a perfect time to start chatting because it has been 5 years now. So once you're kind of a little bit more far removed from the grief stages and kind of going through the shock of the aftermath of a young death, you can kind of step back and go, okay, what could I have done differently? What can I do to help people that may be just embarking on this journey or even thinking ahead? Because, death when we're this young is not something a lot of people think of. Even people that are married or have families, death is not something that's often talked about, or, it becomes an uncomfortable conversation because you don't want to face the fact that it could happen at any time. So my first tip, and this is going to be a proactive tip, is if possible, plan ahead. Put money aside, discuss what your desires are if a spouse were to die or if someone were to die in the family. I would say that would have probably helped a lot. A lot of times when someone is sick, like Matt was, he was battling cancer, it's a very sensitive subject to start discussing death. Because, you want to stay positive for them. You want to kind of carry their belief that they're going to be healed and that what the treatments they're doing is working and everything else. So I would say if Matt and I had had the conversation maybe before he got sick, it would have been a more comfortable conversation where I could have shared my desires and vice versa. So then it's just a natural conversation versus waiting until someone is ill or waiting until it happens and then you don't have any money put aside because funerals can be very expensive. Mm-hmm. And so, making sure that this is not something that's going to potentially add more stress to you suddenly becoming single and having to balance, a household potentially. So I would say if possible, plan ahead. That is my first tip for people.
And I think what's great about that, it's no age limit on that. It's such a important thing to have a conversation regardless, because I'll tell you from my perspective, what I have seen far too often actually is you have significant others and one is ill and failing and the other is the caregiver. Mm-hmm. But what ends up happening is the caregiver dies before the ill person because nobody's ever, the focus has been on the one person for so long that maybe the caregiver put their cough or funny feeling aside and they end up dying first before the ill person. But even if you have that discussion about the ill person dying, reverse that table and talk about just for each other. So you have a basis for each other. I think it's good to just have the conversation, regardless of somebody being towards the end. But especially if your percentage of death is more so than normal when you're in like a hospice or, battling cancer and they've said you're terminal and such, have the conversation. At least you've had it. Maybe you may not need it. And hopefully that's not the case, but yeah.
Yeah, that's such an important point, because like everything you just said, I actually experienced and walked through during Matt's cancer battle and leading up to that, because he had some other health issues. So he was always the focus of the most important. He took priority health-wise in our relationship always. And so I ended up gaining a lot of weight. I had heart palpitations because I was the sole caregiver. I was working a full-time job in corporate America, very demanding. I was the caretaker in so many ways, our home, everything. And so you're right. Like I did put myself aside and started having like eye problems. Like one of my eyes has permanent damage. And I went to so many specialists eventually, and they're like, this is stress induced. Like this is at your age, this is all stress. Like, are you going through something stressful? And I'm like, how do I explain to them everything that's happening? So that is absolutely true. That's why I say, like, if you can have the conversation right when you marry someone, or even in a situation where it might be you and your parents, where you know you're going to have to take care of those things, have the conversation ahead of time before someone gets sick. So I am now newly engaged and going to be married soon. I will be having that conversation, having something in writing before either one of us ever has to even face illness, God forbid. But if that happens, we have some money put aside for that. We know kind of what we desire for a funeral. Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be buried? All of those things are important to discuss, just so you've wrapped your mind around what you're going to do if that does happen. It's like an insurance plan or anything else that we put in place for our life.
Well, it's putting a mental file that you have the information and it's just somewhere. So then if that situation does come, you almost can go on a little autopilot by pulling that information out and going, oh yeah, this, and this is what needs to happen. So let's make that happen, rather than, oh crap, we have to start from scratch. And also question, is this what my loved one would want for themselves too? And then it brings you into a whole internal battle of, am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right thing? Because I don't know what they would have wanted. So even just, you're not going to build a house without their input. Everything you want their input on. So why not a funeral for them, or whatever they want for end of life disposition and stuff. So no,
absolutely. And then also to jump on that point, because that's another excellent point. This is why you're the pro. But jumping on that, you will have families that have opinions. You have, and this wasn't the case in this wasn't the case for me, but I know, and I've heard like, especially in certain cultures and things, like the mom, for example, if there's a wife, the mom might have a very strong opinion on how she wants her son buried. So if you know the desires of your loved one before they pass away, you can say, well, this was their desire. And so it takes away a lot of that stress and family feuding potentially. So the more information you can plan ahead of time where they've signed off on it, or you've signed off on what you desire for yourself, it really eliminates some of that stress, because it's already a stressful situation and people start picking about different things they can control because it helps some people through grief. And so it can eliminate a lot of that as well.
That's awesome. What's your next one on your list?
My next one is for a tip for, when someone actually does pass away. The thing that helped me so much kind of move through by the way, Matt and I did not plan ahead. That's why that's my tip. I really did not expect him to pass away. I fully just believed all the time that he was going to make it. He went through so many health things and always made it. And so when he did pass away, it came as a shock to me that it happened. And so something that helped me immensely was just making the funeral as personal as possible. It really allowed me to go through, instead of focusing on just the grief and devastation of the moment, like really celebrating who he was and being able to just bring like just a lot of beautiful aspects of who he was for people that didn't know him as intimately as I did. And so I just went to Michael's and made boards of like, these are Matt's favorite things. These are the places we traveled. These are the love notes he wrote. And just, you know, we popped champagne, for example. So we released doves for every year of his life. And I'm not saying you have to do all of these things, but make it personal, because number one, it's going to just be a beautiful experience for people that come to, you know, pay tribute to your loved one. And it may be healing for you as well. So I would say, don't be afraid to put your personal touches on it. And whatever kind of brings you peace through that process, do that.
When understanding you can ask, knowing that you can always ask to do certain things. I know there's families that don't realize they can even bring in like M&Ms and sit around if the person loved M&Ms. You know, something as little as that is such a personal touch to who and nod to who the person was. But even, oh my gosh, this is their motorcycle. Can we bring it in and set it by the casket? Well, yeah, you can. But a lot of people don't realize they can do things. I get questioned by families that don't even know that picture boards are okay. And I know if you walked into a visitation room or a service and there was nothing in there but the funeral home, you know, furniture and this casket with someone in it, how would you feel that compared to walking in and seeing the woman's quilts or snacks that they loved or their motorcycle or things? Like, you want that room to feel like their space and reflecting them and who they were throughout their whole life, not just the end stage. And I think that's so good it allows that also nervous energy for the family, like putting together the boards. It gives you something to do in some of the time, but also not getting overwhelmed by having to accomplish it. Because I think there's some people who focus like, we have to do this. And so like following your heart and like thinking, what do I want to be doing for my loved one right now is so good to do. And for you, it was putting those pictures and making sure his whole life was included, that kind of filled your day and helped you get through each moment, which I think is really good, is to just kind of go with your heart and do what you want to do for that person.
Yeah. There's the time stands still between your loved one passing away and getting to the funeral home. Even though everything happens really fast, it also moves in slow motion, because like you're just counting the minutes down of like being devastated and being in this deep state of grief. And so for me, being sort of a type A person, it helped me to, you know, just have something to do, go to the store, pick out different things that represented him. You know, I included Jolly Ranchers because that was like one of his favorite candies, like exactly what you just said. It just helped me sort of, in the midst of something so devastating, have, you know, points of like laughter, which is so important when you're grieving, and points of like smiling, which is okay to do when someone has just passed away. You can be completely devastated and laughing hysterically at the same time. It doesn't take away from the fact that they meant so much to you. So I just want to give people permission to do that as well. That's not really a tip, but kind of. Yeah. It's okay, because a lot of times people from the outside looking in that may have not lost someone or don't understand this will often judge how people are acting or reacting. And I think it's so important to understand everyone grieves differently and everyone's going to react differently. Like for me, I didn't cry at the funeral. I was just in like survival mode, shock. I'm not comfortable crying in front of people. It's not healing to me. And so I was really in like, make sure everyone's okay mode, because that's where I operate well and can get through something. And then there was a time for grief after that. And so that's kind of a tip. Like, it's okay to grieve and be however you want, and don't let anyone sort of push you in any direction. And if you're from the outside looking in, don't judge how people grieve.
Yeah, I see all too often, and I hear well, you need to go up and you need to kiss them, or you need to go do this, or you need to go do that. And I think that there's perception, especially with a significant other, that, oh, you have to play, your part needs to look like this. You need to be black, and you need to cry this much, and you need to do this, and you need to do that. And it's not taking direction from other people and allowing yourself to do what you are feeling like you need to do in the moment is so important. Yeah, I think that's such a really, really, really good one to dive in on and hear permission for. I think sometimes when people are planning, it's just hearing permission that it's okay. It's okay to cry the whole time. It's okay to not cry at all. It's okay to wear yellow. It's okay to do whatever you feel comfortable doing.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, absolutely, please, if you're watching this, have permission to just be yourself, however you need to get through that time. It's such a difficult time, and there's really no right or wrong. In my culture, I'm Middle Eastern. It's really like, if you're not crying and like almost at the point of like breaking down, it's considered that you may not care as much, or how come you're not, you know, falling on the casket, or, you know, and it's like, I didn't do any of that. When I saw Matt there, I really had made peace at that point with who he was. I didn't feel like I needed to kiss him at that point. It wasn't healing or closure for me personally. I really just think that it's really, really important to understand whatever it is that you do and whatever it is that your family does, it's all okay.
Yeah. So what else you have for us?
Yeah. So my next one, and we've talked about this, you and I offline, and I think a little bit in the last YouTube video that we did, but prepare for the sales call. And what do I mean by that? So I didn't realize that going to a funeral home and meeting with a funeral director and going through the planning process was very much a sales call. It is very much about picking different things, making decisions, writing checks. They will try to upsell you. They will try to, you know, push you in different directions. It is very much a sales call. And I was absolutely unprepared for that. I think I was in shock, and it was almost off-putting to me, and sort of felt like, why do you lack so much empathy right now? But this is what they do day in and day out. And there's probably funeral directors that are better than others in that they have empathy, and they, you know, they really kind of are present with the family, but you may run into some that are not, that are a little bit more cold about it, that are a little bit more jaded in terms of like, this is what I do every day. This is my job. So just be prepared that you're going to be making a lot of decisions in a short amount of time. There may be things that you are not prepared to decide on, like you have to decide on a casket, what your loved one's going to wear for their final resting, you know, flowers, all these different things. And so I would say, wrap your mind around the fact that when you go, you are in a sales position, and someone's trying to sell you a funeral.
And of course, I want to totally argue against what you're saying, but it is true. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a business. They're selling things, even if it's just a basic service up to a full, huge service. You have to buy something, and we are selling something. So at the end of the day, it's a business transaction. And you may run into people who are commission-based, who are focused on that sale, who are trying to upsell you, and definitely you're going to possibly run into somebody like that. And the sad part is if somebody's run into somebody like that, and then they go to the next funeral home, to a different funeral home, sometimes they're almost defensive, going in like, oh, I'm so not getting upsold by you. And it's not somebody who's sales driven, and it's like, why don't they like me? And so from the director's standpoint, we're like, why don't they like me? What did I do? Even though they've had this other experience. So you do get two polar opposites, but don't always expect that that's going to be what you get, because it's not always that way. And it's hard to know ahead of time. If it's
Mhm.
a large corporate type thing, which is kind of where you were dealing with, it's definitely going to be a little different than if you're at a small, 50 call a year little town funeral home. Is not going to be as machine-like as where you were at, because that place is ginormous.
Yes, I 100% agree. And I know that was my personal experience. And I know I was in sales for many years of my life. I was a salesperson in the medical sales space for over 15 years. So I recognized what was happening very quickly because I come from that world. And I also know that that is not, just like with me and being in sales, like not every salesperson is the same. Of course, not every funeral home or funeral director is going to be the same. And all the points you made are absolutely accurate, but just at least brace yourself for the fact that you're going to be making a lot of decisions in a short amount of time, and you're going to pay for it at the end of that transaction. So, you're not going to walk in and there's going to be therapy, so to speak. I mean, you're going to walk in and you have to make decisions. I mean, it's the planning process, right? So I think I was just shocked because, again, going back to point number one that we made, we've given this zero thought. Like zero. I have no idea. I've never buried anyone. I've been to funerals, but I was a guest, so to speak, on the outside. I never had to plan anything for anyone. I was young. I was just in shock. I think that we were going into this moment where it was like, okay, here's a list. Let me show you some stuff. What plot do you want? We'll drive by. I was like, what is happening? But you have to make those decisions. So
it's very surreal, I imagine, being in that moment, because being in that moment means somebody has died. So it's kind of embracing these two big things that, okay, I'm doing this, but it means that this happened because I'm doing this. And like everything swirling, I feel like must be some of what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So what else do you have for us?
So the last one I have, or I guess a couple, I know we kind of like go into other conversations as it comes up. Take someone with you. Definitely take someone with you to that planning process. Even if you are sort of like a lone ranger type of person and you're the kind of person that wants to get everything done yourself and you don't want to involve other people, because some people are that way. I would say it's really nice because you are grieving and because you are in a moment of sometimes having an out-of-body experience. Sometimes you're still in shock over the whole thing. So really have someone there to be able to say, hey, I know you love your loved one and you want to get the $20,000 casket, but let's go back to reality that you have to go back to life. So just have someone there to sort of help you navigate and help you make decisions that are logical as well as meaningful, because you can do both without going there and spending your life savings because you just feel like you don't care at that moment. You're just like, I don't care, just give me whatever. And you can really end up making some bad decisions emotionally. So definitely take someone with you, someone you trust, someone that's maybe not as closely related to the person, so they're not emotional with you. So I would say that's my next tip.
No, I think that's a great one. And that person you bring, I mean, they're going to hear, just like the funeral director, we have to talk sometimes hard conversations about financials. So if you want the person that's there knowing about all your financials, don't bring them. If you're bringing somebody, then they need to be able to be exposed to everything that we might potentially be talking about. I know that was the case for you, and you kind of brought your rock of a brother-in-law with you, and he's a business person, and so he really got the side of having lost this brother-in-law and a good friend, but also the business side. So he really had a good vantage point for you to help you through those conversations, which was really good.
Yeah, he was a rock in so many ways. I mean, I don't think I could have made it through that entire process without him. He really and sometimes people will step up and it may not be who you thought was going to be your rock. But he just really stepped into that role of support. And he was really someone I could lean on and talk to and laugh with and cry with, and really still stayed very focused and logical, and helped me through the process. So you may think ahead of time, like, oh, if this happened, this is who I would want by my side. But just be prepared that that may change when something actually happens. Sometimes those people aren't well equipped in that moment, emotionally or whatever, to be that person for you. So just be open to sort of who steps up and what you need. And it's okay if you shift for what you need in that moment.
That's so good. That's so good. Because I see it all the time, and it does happen. Or people who think they're helping and they're not helping. And you have to be like, okay, back up, because you're not.
Yeah. And it's okay to tell people, like, I just need, which is my next tip, which is assign people tasks if you need to, because sometimes people want to be in a role that they're not well equipped for. You don't want the most emotional person that can't stop crying to come to the funeral home with you necessarily, because you need that support in that moment, being the closest person to the deceased. And if that's the case, you want someone that's a little bit more, maybe a little bit more far removed, and that person can play a different role. Maybe they can play a role in setting up a board to represent your loved one or something like that. So don't be afraid to ask for what you need and to take people off of tasks. It's hard on everyone when this is happening. There's so many moving parts. So yeah, assign tasks if you can, or assign one person to assign tasks so that you're not having to assign tasks constantly.
Delegate.
I'll
tell people at arrangements, I'll say, people want to help you.
Mm-hmm.
Let them. Send them to the store to buy you your Diet Coke. Send them with your car to go fill it up with gas. I mean, just let people do small things so you can focus on the big things you need to do. You need to be fed, but do you want to go to a grocery store? No. You need to, get new socks. Let somebody go buy you socks if you don't want to go to Kohl's that day. So just delegating and really choosing your time, because like you said, it goes really slow, but it's also that time goes so fast that you don't even know. It's like, oh my gosh, I didn't get anything done. I wasn't able to do that. I wasn't able to do that because I was doing this. And you may go to get your significant other's clothing out of the closet, and you may not come out of the closet for 2 hours because you have a moment, and then you can't go to the store to get your Diet Coke or go fill up your gas tank because you're having your moment. So delegating is so important, like you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And here's the other thing, I think in the case of having been a caregiver for so long, because I know that's probably a lot of people's reality, especially when there's illness involved. When you take on the role of 24/7 caregiver, especially if your spouse is sick or something like that, you're really no longer used to having people help you. Because so much has to be done all the time that it becomes a part of your nature that you're in this alone, you're getting it done. It's easier to just do it yourself versus asking other people, and then they want to know how you're doing, and then you're having to answer for how your loved one is doing, and it just becomes so exhausting all the way around that for me, I became so type A and like controlling everything that in a situation like this, it's okay to step away from that. If that brings you peace and you still want to do it all yourself, great. I still say bring people along the way so you're not making emotional decisions. But if you can, delegate as much as you can. Like you said, people want to help, and it blesses them to help. So we think like, oh, we're being burdens on people. I don't want to do that because they have their own life going on. I don't want to burden them. But the truth is, when people are able to step in and help, it blesses them to be able to be a part of what's happening. So even if you're like me, try to delegate. It's really going to make your life easier and be able to involve other people that just really love you.
So good. Thank you again for bringing tips and coming and talking again to all of us. I think it is such a unique, like I said, point that you can speak from, having gone through a loss, gone through young and unplanned, and trying to navigate your way. I can't imagine at my age, like all of a sudden having to do it all, not having any of the knowledge I had. I feel like being the age would be not a handicap, but definitely you don't plan for a short life with somebody or for your parents or anything. It's just not something we embrace at our age, is that shortness of life. So, well, thank you everybody for joining us, and make sure to post questions that you have for Nidhal or for myself. And if you pray blessings over her and her new marriage coming up and relationship. And you've definitely found the right person for this next part of your life. I think it's so wonderful. It makes me so happy.
Thank you. Thank you, Kari.
Well, thanks everybody, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.